Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. I know you guys get fewer of these days, and there's going to be fewer of them in the future. But if you like these type of videos, please support it by clicking the like down below. If you're not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. But a subscriber linked me a video by ScottHermanFitness. He's like, Jason, I think you'll actually appreciate this video. Scott has admitted to some things he got wrong, and a lot of it's stuff you've been critical of him about in the past. And I checked it out, and that seems to be the case. And before I go any further into it, I want to actually say I respect Scott for having done this, okay? Because that is what a good coach has to do. I get people who give me flack for changing my stance on stuff, and I have to remind people I am a professional coach at this point. I coach a pretty large number of clients, all right? It's a big chunk of my livelihood. I have to be right. I have to give my clients the best possible coaching advice that I can, and if that means that I'm incorrect on something, I have to update my stance because they're paying me to give them the best advice, right? We can't be dogmatic about silly nonsense for our paying clients. They have to get results. And that means we must be right and we must give them the best advice that we can. So when Scott does something like this, he is basically saying, look, I'm trying to be a better coach, a better trainer. And he is a massive resource for novice lifters. He's a massive resource for novice lifters on YouTube. And people say, what do you mean novices? And they might take that as being an insult, but the fact of the matter is it's a novice lifters channel. There is no intermediate or advanced lifter who's going to go there for advice. And that should be common sense. People say, well, what do you mean? You don't mean it's useful? No, it's not useful. There is nothing about periodization anywhere in there. The very first conversations we should be having with anyone who is not a novice lifter anymore is what form of periodization are we going to run? Okay? How are we going to structure and organize our progression? Right? Novice lifters can come in and just train hard. We can be discussing, hey, full body 3 days a week, and that works great. We can be discussing just basic progressive overload, appropriate volume, because you know what? That's the stuff that will get a novice lifter in good form, right? That's how you get a novice lifter out of the novice phase. You get them big, get them strong, and move them forward. That won't work anymore after the novice phase. All right, all of that becomes information is not going to be helpful. We need to be discussing whether we're going to run linear versus concurrent periodization. All right, those are the conversations we need to be having for people outside of that phase. And if you're not having those conversations, your information is no longer useful for that demographic. No value. So, but it is a novice channel, and there's an enormous audience for that. So from a marketing perspective, that's a good thing because 95% of people who go to a gym every week at any given time around the world are novice lifters. 95%. I speak to a more niche audience, right? I have a lot of intermediates here. Quite a few advanced lifters, but I have a lot of intermediates. I have a lot of people in my following, when you guys see the comments, who are benching 300 plus, deadlifting over 500. I mean, that's pretty normal in my comments section. So, different audience. But he's got a very large novice audience, and accordingly, he needs to get this stuff right. And I can appreciate the fact that the big ones, it's going to be cutting out some of these partial exercises. Now, where I will disagree, my only criticism, he said, I haven't taught anything that's dangerous. And I'm going to say, Scott, you taught 3 things that are dangerous. Number 1, 2 of them you addressed in the video. 2 of them you addressed in the video, and the third being the above the knee rack pull. Stupid, dangerous exercise. And one day he's going to come around, because he still argued, he got in arguments with me about it in the past, he's going to come around and realize it was a stupid exercise and it was the most moronic thing he's ever taught. He'll realize it one day. Most of the experts agree on that. It's not my opinion. It's not just my opinion. I've been saying it for years. Multiple legitimate top-end experts, including people with PhDs in different fields of exercise science, all say it's a stupid, dangerous exercise that doesn't even put muscle on you. All right? That's the general consensus. So that's the one I'm going to say, well, you need to do that one next. But we do these things in step. He came around to admitting 2 of the big ones, and I'm going to appreciate and respect the fact that he changed them. And that was the bench pressing, stopping at 90 degrees. Horrible, terrible advice. Horrible, terrible advice. As again, he realized not only do you get less chest growth, less strength, everything else, I'm going to go over and say that that is actually a higher risk of injury. Okay. Learning to bench correctly and learning how to sink it into your chest correctly, sink it into your chest, is the safest way to bench. Okay, it has the lowest injury rate. Stopping before you touch your chest, unless you absolutely know what you're doing, and we're not talking about a bench press at that point, we're talking about a different exercise. I'm not going to get into all the details of the Spoto press, but not touching your chest on your primary bench training actually runs a risk of tearing a pectoral. That actually has, in my experience, my observation, my anecdote, even observing it, and just looking at the way the human body responds to things, you actually have the highest chance of tearing a pectoral. Doing that high up on the chest and stopping short of the chest, that's the guys who tear pecs. And we have multiple YouTubers who've done it, by the way, that way. So that's how you tear a pectoral. It's dangerous, it's bad, and it puts less muscle on you. He's corrected it, admitted it, is now doing it correctly. So he's grown as a trainer, right? That's a good thing. Nothing but credit there. Same thing, squat. Having people squat trying to stop with the knees at 90 degrees, yeah, he's right. We can squat deeper than that. And we need to be squatting fairly deep. We need to be going below parallel. Now, I'll come back over to the other point, not just for strength, not just for development, but let's talk about injury prevention. What's the fastest way to get injured on a squat? Do half squats, right? Stopping above parallel is, in my experience over the decades, the #1 cause of squat injuries. #1 cause of people getting hurt. Every person you've ever met who said squats hurt their knees, who didn't squat in knee wraps. Let's make that caveat. People who don't use knee wraps. Anyone who's ever hurt their knees from squatting, there's a 99% chance they were a half squatter, right? They didn't go all the way down. That is actually what causes more shear on the knee. That's what causes knee damage. That's what hurts people. That's dangerous. It's stupid. It's goofy ego lifting. It's like, oh, so I can put 400 pounds on the bar when I'm really only a 300-pound squatter. Or, you know, some of the guys 600 pounds on the bar when they're only a 500-pound squatter, right? It's ego lifting. And it destroys your knees and it puts less muscle and strength on you, right? Exactly what it does. I'm not saying pen work for partials doesn't have its place for certain forms of strength. Athlete is a technique tool, okay? But for building muscle, for building strength and doing it safely, there is no reason to ever stop short of parallel on a squat on the way down. Okay, we don't ever stop short of that. We don't ever stop short of that. So he's corrected two of those biggest things in addition to his other stuff about full body, other stuff. Other stuff was all good. The other stuff was good in there that he's addressed. Those were the two big ones, and those are ones I've been critical of in the past. And so the man has basically stepped up and said, I was wrong. This is why I was wrong. This is the correct way to do it. That's absolutely commendable. That should be commended. That's respectable. I respect that. I'm going to respect that. Now, I just want him to do the same thing on the above the knee rack pulls. Because that one, for the same reasons we were talking about, is a concern. And let's step back and think about that for a moment. What is it we're concerned with all these other partial lifts on? Well, #1, training yourself in such a way to where you're doing partial, so you're ego lifting. You're lifting a heavier weight than you can possibly move, right? Lifting a heavier weight than you can possibly move without proper safeties in place, so it tends to lead to things like tearing pecs when the weight drops too low. Same thing with the squat. You tend to have additional shear, additional knee slide with a weight you are not physically capable of squatting. It puts a lot of shear on the knee. Well, you come back over to that above the knee rack pull. What do we get? We get an exercise that is an extreme partial. And the guys who are standing here saying, yeah, but it works the traps through this mechanism. It doesn't. It doesn't, guys. Stretch overloading is not, let me repeat this. Stretch overloading is not a proven mechanism of maximizing hypertrophy in a muscle. We don't have human studies that have shown it. The anecdote doesn't show it. And the only anecdote these guys use who promote this exercise are guys who do enormous amounts of dynamic work through all angles for the traps, right? It's not the fact that they do farmer's walks. Most strong men do a lot of shoulder exercises. They probably do at least 10 heavy different movements that work the traps through different angles, not just loaded carries. And almost all of them are on anabolics, which also impact the entire shoulder structure more than a lot of other muscles in the body. That is the worst example to use. And the simple reality is every single guy just about who does these above the knee rack pulls to build his traps doesn't have bigger traps than anybody else. They don't have exceptional traps from having done them, and plenty of them still have tiny traps after a long time of doing them. All the experts who look at it say, look, it has a higher chance of injury. It's harder to recover from. Even Jeff Cavalier did a whole video showing how it can actually cause nerve damage in your upper body. So all of these things that people are trying to do thinking they're going to grow bigger traps, when the truth of the matter is on a properly structured strength program, traps are one of the easiest muscles to grow. They're actually not that big of a deal. Your traps tend to get really big on proper, well-structured strength training without even giving them any direct thought. Okay? You don't see really strong guys who don't have big traps. It just doesn't happen. And it's not because they did endless amounts of trap isolation movements or trap specific movements. It's because all of the big heavy movements and all of the stuff associated with it just tend to work your traps from every different angle on every one of your workout sessions. When you're on a properly structured strength program, every day ends up being trap day, right? No matter how you split it up. That's just the nature of the beast. But, as I've said before, he will eventually come around to that one. I have no doubt in my mind. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.